Hi, Sam here again, and I'm back for the second edition of the Q&A series. So once again, we're going to take half a dozen questions that you lot have given me and go into them in depth for this second Q&A. The first one I've got today is, why don't people eat fats and carbs together? Why do they say not to eat them together in the same meal? Your foods with fats and foods with carbohydrates. Well, actually, before answering that specific question, I could go back and actually say that when it comes to natural foods, whole foods, things that actually grow in the ground or hatch or swim or run around like real foods, unprocessed foods, fats and carbs don't really exist together within the same individual foods, except for nuts and seeds. With the exception of those, you just don't really find them together in natural foods. So when you have animal food, very roughly speaking, that is a fat and protein combination, which can be more or less lean in the ratio between fat and protein there. And then the plant foods tend to be the protein and carbohydrate combination, with some level of, well, in all foods, some level of water, but they tend to be a kind of incomplete protein and some mixture of carbohydrates, more towards the sugars or single sugars, monosaccharides and disaccharides in your fruits, and then more your starch, your bound up glucose in root vegetables, and that's how it sits. So they don't tend to come together in nature anyway. It's kind of a product in a meal that would only happen when you're combining separate foods. But the reason that they say not to combine them is because they're two different ways that your body can run on energy when you take fats versus carbohydrates. That's one reason. You're sort of mixing them up if you have them in the same food. Now, it can be useful if you're diabetic and you need the glucose, but you want to slow it down so it's digested and given to you more slowly by having it combined with fat in the meal. So there's some specific usages, but generally you'll be fueling on one or the other kind of works better. But the main reason is because of body composition. So when we form adipose tissue, well, when fat cells grow, basically, that is a result of triglycerides forming in the fat cell. And a triglyceride is 3 fatty acids, that's tri, and the fatty acids come from the dietary food, and a molecule of glycerol. And glycerol comes from glucose, which is your carbohydrate. It's either in the carbohydrate total of the food as glucose, or it's bound together as sucrose, which is glucose and fructose together, or it's all just bound up as glucose in starch. So when you have glucose going around at the same time as fatty acids going around in the bloodstream, you've got all the ingredients at the same time for creating fat in the fat cells as triglycerides. So that's why we don't tend to do it. Not only that, on the carb side, you're causing more insulin to be secreted by the pancreas to bring your blood sugar level down, and that is what tells your cells, muscle and fat cells, to store. So when you have that combination in food of fats and carbohydrates together, both hormonally speaking and ingredients for forming fat, which is triglycerides speaking, you have the perfect storm for forming body fat. So you get fat more easily, more quickly. So it's bad for body composition, and that's the main reason. So in a bodybuilding diet, it's quite common to have some meals in the day consecutively, or around the whole day-to-day cycle consecutively, as a fat and protein combo, and then certain ones will be a carbohydrate and protein combo. And usually when trying to recomp or cut, the carbohydrate and protein combo foods or meals will be closer to the workout, either before and after, or just after, or just in the middle of the day, and then perhaps the breakfast and perhaps the dinner will be lower or non-existent on the carbohydrate side and be more the fat and protein combo. Hope that makes sense. Obviously, anything in-depth nutrition, it will be videos that I'll come back to to explain certain concepts in more detail, but that's why. Next question. Is going to failure physical or in the mind? That's a really good question, and it's one that you're going to have to get some training experience to determine. There are those days where we're training all out and we know physically that we can't manage that one more rep or that next part of a drop set or whatever it is you're trying to do. But then if we're really honest with ourselves, I think we all know that there's days where our head isn't in the game. We were distracted by something. Sleep was poor. We weren't, so focused. We're lacking motivation because we don't have appropriate goals set. And for whatever reason in the head, we give up on a set whether we were physically done or not. And if we were really honest with ourselves, we could have grinded out a little bit more. So I would say that you start to know the difference after a period of experience, say a year or two. You get to observe that where you lifted more one week, you're now a little bit less this week, but this week you had some stresses going on. You paid less attention to your progress. You weren't in the mood to go into the gym that day, whatever it is. So they are related, and you get a sense of whether you're really failing, I would say, and that's the physical side, or whether it's something that could have pushed further, and you knew that failure was more a mental thing. You get a sense for that, and it's up to you to refocus, or maybe you do need a program adjustment that gives you more rest, or maybe you need some new goals. Like if this becomes a consistent problem, but sometimes it's just an off day kind of problem. There's always ways around it. If it's a particular off day or something feels like it hurts in the wrong way, like verging on the edge of an injury, perhaps you best do something else, or in some cases just go home. If it's a more consistent pattern, then maybe you need to look at whether your program is providing adequate rest or whether your nutrition is on point to support what you're doing. I hope that makes sense. Next question. What about your food bill? To be that size, isn't it all too expensive? Well, it is true that certain cuts of meat can be more expensive than general packaged food or a diet with less quantity of food in it overall. But I think while it's true that if you're going to go and buy like ribeye steaks and duck to eat on a consistent basis, your food bill's going to go up. If you take this whole diet and this whole lifestyle as a lifestyle bundle, it should be cheaper or about the same. So I don't drink, for example. I don't spend on other things that tend to come with drink, like fast food after a night out, and I economise the foods that I do buy. And as it's set to a plan, I'm not, just ordering random takeaways very often. So I think if you do actually baseline and track all of the money that you spend on food, even without going shopping for cheap things, it may actually be cheaper in the whole because you're not ordering those takeaways, you're not going drinking on the regular, if at all, and it may actually be cheaper in the whole system of things. But on top of that, the advice I would give is to try and find the more economical way of doing all of it. So you want a gym membership, if you pay up front for a year, then that should be a lot cheaper than going month by month, for example. But specifically when it comes to the food, look at where the restaurant owners shop. If you can go to a wholesaler, or you can buy from a local farm or something like that, and you've got a chest freezer, you can buy meat in quantities that you can cut it up and not have to go shopping again so soon. But you can get cuts of red meat, the cheaper end, like, I don't know, say top side, shoulder, chuck, brisket, that kind of thing, for £5, £5.50 per kilo. So now it's possibly cheaper than your chicken, and organ meats are super cheap. So, if you want to make it even cheaper and more effective, then there are ways to do that as well. Next question, a little bit different. There's a new trend of what people are calling a health phase. Not sure about this. Firstly, are you actually healthy? And secondly, that implies when you blast, you are about to be unhealthy. An element of truth, but also not optimal at all. Okay, well, I would just compare like bodybuilding to other pursuits and other sports, and I think most sports, particularly the more extreme ones or contact sports or the more physically demanding sports, no disrespect to other sports, do require things to be done season, by recuperation period, by off season, followed by the next competitive season. That's the norm in all sports. So you take like rugby or football, that's soccer, but football here, and they have their time off. They wouldn't be able to play a rugby match every week, just week in, week out throughout the whole year, from year to year, and not fall apart. So it's like that with everything, and I think with bodybuilding it is physically demanding, and you need time to recuperate, and you need time to check your health. Obviously, unless you get an injury where you've torn a muscle, not all of the internal health is visible to you. So a health phase is an opportunity to do certain checks like blood tests or a heart scan. That's an echocardiogram. So something like an echocardiogram annually, blood tests every 3 to 6 months. That might be someone's protocol, and the bulk of that might happen in a certain period that you then call a health phase, when you're not blasting it, as you put it, and that can be very sustainable. I think if you do it in a cyclical manner and you do keep an eye on those internal things, it can be something that provides longevity to all of this while still enjoying it at a high level. I mean, if you look at most of the guys from the golden era, they've lived full lives. Many of them are still amazing shape now. You take Frank Zane or even Robbie Robinson. These guys have been around for decades and they're doing just fine. And I think if you take that kind of moderate approach and check on things, and that would include what the buzzword health phase is now, that's perfectly enjoyable. Now, if you want something healthier and safer than that, there's sports that aren't going to present really any risks. So, you got like snooker or darts or anything else that makes you happy, any pastime where it's not, pushing the boat out so much in terms of demands on your body. Like, you might enjoy photography or gardening. I think the point I'm trying to make really is that what's optimal depends what makes the individual happy. And I think if bodybuilding makes you happy and you want to enjoy it for a long time, then these kind of checkups, I know the buzzword health phase might be a bit cringy, they're going to be part of that for you to be happy enjoying what you like. So I'm all for it. And I think, I can't say that it's the most healthy thing to go full on with bodybuilding indefinitely, but there are ways to arrange this throughout the calendar that can make it perfectly enjoyable and live a full life and really enjoy what you enjoy doing the most, if that happens to be bodybuilding. So there's certain things that are sustainable all the time, like some level of exercise and certain type of diet, but then there's other things that are not sustainable all the time. So you may find it sustainable to be in some kind of regimen that would be described as TRT, but it might not be sustainable, or I'd suggest it's definitely not sustainable to be on toxic medicines or products that are only really intended for animals, like all year round. And that's like, what people do recreationally for fun anyway. I mean, it's what someone would drink on a stag do isn't the same as having a glass of wine, every weekend with your Sunday meal or whatever. So, with bodybuilding and everything that goes into it, there's what's kind of like acceptable all year round, and then there's what's kind of maybe necessary just for special occasions, like a contest, for example. So, I'm all for a health phase. I just maybe don't like the term. Maybe that's kind of a buzzword now, but you want to enjoy this for a long time, you need to consider health, and it's what I enjoy, so I'm all for it. Next question. I don't have time to eat consistently, especially getting the protein in. Can I mostly use shakes, like protein shakes? Okay, good question. And in one of my recent videos, I do actually show how to make it really easy to meal prep for an entire day and get, off the top of my head, in what was in that meal prep was nearly 300 grams of protein. So, it is actually doable with the real food. But you'll only know how well shakes or any method really is working for you when you test it. So say you made a diet plan and it had 3 protein shakes per day in it and only 2 protein meals. You can track your weight, your strength, your measurements, your body fat levels estimated with something like calipers week after week after week. And you know, if it's working for you, stick with it. It's only really when something's not working that adjustments need to be made. So that's the same with all aspects of bodybuilding or getting progress in anything really, is you need to baseline what you're doing, measure the results and adjust accordingly as those results come in. But I will say that when you listen to the top coaches and the best information out there, I do seem to get a picture of like the higher and higher you go up in this, like the less liquid meals are being used and the more real food and high quality real food come into play. So I don't really recommend it with loads of shakes, but me personally, I don't feel that I digest them that well, so I steer clear. But if you start having them, you feel that you're digestively happy with them, particularly if you're having like whey isolate rather than the concentrate, or you find a product that suits you best and the results are coming in, then stick with it. And last question for today, what are the main exercises for back width? Okay, the width of the back is mainly coming from the lats and the teres, everything kind of out here as opposed to like in the middle. In the middle at the top, you've got that big kite shape, that's the trapezius. Below that, you've got the spinal erectors, which are hit really heavily with deadlifts and hyperextensions and things like that. The traps in any shrug and rowing, and the thickness of the mid-back with the rowing. But really to get that pull down, and you can feel it on your own body, is the lats. And more, if it's more than a diagonal angle, it's more the teres. Teres major and teres minor. Have a look at this on an anatomy diagram and it will make more sense if you didn't already realise. But I'll get around to the answer. Basically, it's kind of pull-ups and any machine where it pulls more at that down or diagonal down angle as opposed to kind of this way, the rowing angle. So you've got your pull downs with a cable, but because pull-ups are harder and you have to stabilize more, it just puts more stress on the muscle. I've found that pull-ups are much more effective. That's my experience. If you can't do them, you're best just to do the negative portion and static holds until you can do a few, but still use those. By negatives, I mean like getting a box and jumping up into the top position and then only working yourself in lowering yourself. And by static holds, I mean like jumping up to the top position and holding it for as long as you can and counting the seconds. Once you do those consistently, you'll find that you can do proper pull-ups. And then beyond that, you've got weighted pull-ups where you take like the dip belt with the chain and you put the weight through it, like your 10 or 20 kilo plate, and you can add to the resistance that way. But they're a lot more stress than the pull downs, so I recommend like taking the time to learn pull-ups properly. And then it's really these machines, particularly the hammer strength ones, that pull at that kind of like down angle. And because they lock you into the seat, they're like harder to cheat on and harder to swing at than using like a cable pull down. So I really like the one by Hammer Strength where it's pulling at a diagonal angle like this. You can really feel it in your lats if you set the seat right height, and a little bit cable rows, but not so much. It's more these pull-ups and diagonal pulls that really bring in the lat width. And that's it for today. That's my Q&As version 2 or edition 2, and I look forward to any questions you may have. If you want yours to be in the next video, just pop it in the comments here and I'll get round to it on one of the next Q&A videos. Cheers.